The final race of the season for the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain here on the Donington Park National Circuit is about to get underway. Cars heading out onto the grid then ahead of their warm-up lap and another 25 minutes of racing then. They had a race earlier on this morning in rather unpleasant conditions, it must be said. The track, though, is now, for the most part, dry. There are a few stubborn damp patches that refuse to dry out completely, but generally speaking, it is a dry track. They'll all be out there looking to try and maximise the performance of these very, very rapid Porsche Cayman GT4 Club Sport cars. And this new for 2020 championship as it was, it's the second season of racing for these cars, and it's been very exciting to watch indeed. We've got our reigning champion, actually outgoing champion, James Dorlin, racing with us this weekend. The championship already wrapped up by Theo Edgerton last time out, so he's not racing. Our current champion not racing, but our reigning champion very much is, and James Dorlin has had a pretty successful time of it so far, because James was the race winner in race 1 earlier on today. Had a little bit of early pressure from the likes of Matthew Armstrong, but fairly quickly was able to get himself off up the road, pulled out a nice gap and won eventually by 9.1 seconds. Let's take a look then, shall we, at how the grid lines up for this second 25-minute race of the day, the final race of the season for this championship. James Dorlin on pole and Matthew Armstrong alongside. It is the race result from race 2 that sets the grid for this one. Harry Foster is making his debut in the championship alongside Charles Clark for Into Racing. They make up row number 2 of the grid, and then it's Jack Bartholomew with Alexei Maliakin on the 3rd row. Row number 4 for Rob Boston. He was delayed at the start of the race earlier on today with a slow start. Made some good progress after that though. Matt Carl-Henny, one of the revelations, getting a 2nd place in the AM category on his first attempt in race 1. Nigel Rice and Carl Cavers round out the top 10 cars on the grid. And then as we move towards the rear of the field, Kurt Leimer, another debutant. Pete Chambers, not a debutant, very experienced Porsche racer is Pete. And John White rounds out the 13-car field. So the grid making its way around, the field making its way around to the grid, I should say. Some really interesting names on the grid for the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. Some who, as I alluded to, have been racing Porsches for a lot longer than others. Porsche does seem to be a brand that generates a lot of loyalty when you start racing Porsches. Tend to stay racing them for quite some time. Matt Carl-Henny there, for example, from a Porsche racing family. His father, Peter, has raced in Carrera Cup Great Britain for a number of years. Matt debuted in the Porsche Club Great Britain Championship, which is almost like a club-level version of this championship, really, with slightly older models of cars, and is the Class 2 champion in that series for 2021. And then you've got those that are brand new to it, including some that are making their first ever racing appearances. I mean, Harry Foster, who was a cadet karting champion back in 2013, but we haven't seen racing out on circuits all that much, if at all. And Harry immediately impressing here in his debut appearance in the championship. So the field makes its way out of the hairpin then. James Dorlin will line up on pole position. I mentioned that Theo Edgerton isn't racing. He was the Pro Class champion. The same is true of Ian Humphries, actually, who provisionally secured the AM category championship last time out as well, and is now racing in Porsche Carrera Cup Great Britain. In fact, raced here at Donington Park in that championship just a week ago. So neither of our 2021 champions with us this weekend, but we've still got a competitive field across both classes, both the Pro and the AM category, and it's headed by the outgoing champion then, James Dorlin, looking to try and get a good start here from pole position in very different conditions from those that he experienced a few hours earlier. Watching for the red lights then. When they go out, we're away and racing here for the final time this season in the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. 25 minutes of racing around the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit. Lights on, lights go out now. Away they go. Good start by the looks of it from James Dorlin. Not such a good one, though, from the outside of row number 1 by Matthew Armstrong. So he's under a lot of threat there. That's that's not Charles Clark. That is number 24 trying to get up the inside into the first corner of Harry Foster. Didn't get 2nd place, but he does manage to hang on to 3rd place. Jack Bartholomew, look, is ahead of the Charles Clark car, and now he goes into 3rd. So Bartholomew from 5th on the grid is now into P3. Charles Clark almost into the back of Harry Foster, and as he bailed out of that, he then nearly gets ran into by the cars behind. So, frenetic stuff through the opening few corners. There is Alexei Malyakin, who is, I don't think, leading the AM class at the moment, is he? As they head their way up to the top end of the circuit. Round the outside line there is the number 25, that's Kyle Henny. Up the inside of him attempts to go Nigel Rice. Is Nigel going to get that one into Coppice? Yes, he does. That they might be able to retaliate on the exit of the corner. Let's see, gets a good exit from the turn. And makes his way down towards the chicane, very much on the attack. So too is Charles Clark here as he tries to get himself ahead of Harry Foster, both of them having lost out to Jack Bartholomew on the opening half a lap. Bartholomew already starting to get away, but Bartholomew, of course, had a couple of offs, didn't he, at the chicane in race 1 earlier on, and so we know has podium potential. In fact, he's closing on Matthew Armstrong for second place. Oh, side pace further back. That was pretty spectacular. I think that was Nigel Rice, wasn't it? Who was a little bit wayward coming out of the Melbourne hairpin. Through Goddard's, though, out onto the pit straight we go then. The first lap completed. James Dorlin already getting away. Look at that for a lead. 2 seconds his cushion over. Armstrong second, Bartholomew third. Then a small gap back to Harry Foster fourth, but for how much longer? Charles Clark looked to the inside line. Couldn't quite commit to it fully. In the AM category, it is Malyakin back into the class lead now from Kurt Leimer. Kurt Leimer has picked up 3 positions there to go 8th place overall and second in the AM class. That's really, really good stuff, that, from Kurt, who has little to no circuit racing experience. He was a Swiss hill climber for many a year. And yeah, Leimer then into second place in the class now as Charles Clark goes around the outside of Harry Foster, and that should now give him 4th position. For second place, meanwhile, they're almost overlapping as well. So lots going on here. All at the same time. There is Kurt Leimer, who has got himself ahead of people who've been racing in this series since its inception, really, the likes of Nigel Rice and Carl Cavers. Kyle Henny has faded, though. He dropped down to 11th place after losing quite a few places on that opening lap. So watch to see if he can regroup from that and get himself back onto the class podium, maybe, as he was in race 1. So Leimer there, second in the AM class. Third place is Rice. Fourth place is Cavers. Then the gap back to Kyle Henny in 5th. And there for second place overall is Jack Bartholomew going up the inside of Matthew Armstrong. And Bartholomew has done it. Brilliant stuff there from the ex-British GT racer. And he moves his way ahead of Matthew Armstrong. He made his championship debut this year. His father, Justin Armstrong, another name that you might know. Guess what he races in? Porsches. Races in the Carrera Cup Great Britain, so much the same vein as Kyle Henny, whose father raced in that championship for many a year. Same true of Matthew Armstrong, who has just lost that second place, but could do worse, actually, than just follow Bartholomew now, try and learn maybe from Jack, where he could find a bit more pace. Doubt either of them will really have an answer for this bloke, though. James Dorlin out of the old hairpin already with a 3.3 second cushion. We've only done 2 laps of the race, so 1:35.0 was his first full flying lap. Compare that to a 45.8 as his fastest lap of the earlier race. You can really see how much better the conditions are now. Here comes Kurt Leimer then, the Swiss driver racing for Team Parker Racing. My favourite livery in the series, no doubt about it. It's an amazing looking car. The teeth on the front end, the distinctive colour scheme. We got to admire it at a rather lower speed in race 1 when he had a spin going up through Starkey's and Schwann's curve. Hopefully he won't repeat that in this one because he's clearly fast enough to get class podiums here. He is 2.3 seconds behind the race leader, the class leader, Alexei Malyakin. But the sector times aren't terrible. In fact, in Sector 2, he's 2/10 faster than Malyakin. So as long as he doesn't have to defend too much here from Nigel Rice and Carl Cavers behind him, he might still have an answer for the class leader. You can see Malyakin there up the road. And also Kyle Henny closing in on that group. So there is Malyakin, the silver-black car with the sort of turquoise stripes. There's Kurt Leimer second. Third place Nigel Rice. Fourth Carl Cavers. And Kyle Henny reeling them in. 1:34.7 is now the new benchmark lap time set by James Dorlin, 3.9 seconds ahead of Bartholomew second, who is nearly a second clear of Matthew Armstrong already. This is definitely the best of the battles right now, with Leimer, Rice, Cavers and Kyle Henny. Hollywood into the Craner curves. Leimer just starting to settle down a bit now. I think almost didn't expect to find himself running so high up the order after a demon first lap, and now is starting to settle into this. He's getting away now from Rice, slightly. Not a big gap between them, but slightly bigger than it was a lap or so ago. Again, on this particular lap in Sector 1, only a 10th off the times being set by Alexi Maliakin up the road. Now, Charles Clark has set the fastest first sector of anybody in this lap to close right in onto the tail now of Matthew Armstrong. And I reckon if he gets past Matthew quickly, he might have ideas about going after Jack Bartholomew up the road. That's not going to happen, though, is it? Because Armstrong is not going to let him through quickly. He's going to defend the inside line into the Melbourne hairpin. Very sideways there for Clark as he comes out of the turn. And Charles Clark, therefore, will lose momentum up the hill. Another driver who actually made his debut in this championship last year, a former podium finisher in that Porsche Club Great Britain Championship that a number of these drivers have graduated from. Very, very competitive little series, that one, and good to see that a lot of the drivers that do well in that series are capable of making the step up into the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge and being successful, at least within the AM category. Purple first sector for Charles Clark didn't come to an improved time in the end because, of course, he lost lots of ground in the final sector. These two are 1.6 seconds behind Bartholomew in second now. I do think that as long as Clark doesn't get stuck behind Armstrong for a number of laps now, he might just have the ability to go after the second place man. You can see the white and green car off in the distance. He also set a personal best lap last time, actually, did Jack Bartholomew, almost within a couple of hundredths of a second of matching James Dorlin. 5-second penalty for Harry Foster, I'm afraid. The 5th placed car, number 24. The car just behind these two, actually, being given a 5-second penalty. Now, again, the timing screen isn't telling me what for, but we're not deep enough into the race. We've only done 4 laps. I'd be surprised if it was track limits. Far more likely it was an out of position or a false start. We've had a penalty for someone else in one of the other races today for just such a thing. So the 5th place car then being demoted by 5 seconds. Now that would at the moment drop him behind Rob Boston, who is running in 6th position, so he'll be looking to try and build a 5-second margin over him. But more to the point, it means that even if Foster can catch the Armstrong and Clark battle ahead of him, which is almost side by side, look, as they come out of the Goddard's hairpin, but even if Foster can become a part of this, he wouldn't really be a part of it on corrected times. So Clark to the outside into Redgate corner, trying to widen the line into the first turn, but Armstrong was clever there. He just about cleared the 77 car going into the turn, and so could move over to take the traditional racing line rather than the tighter, slower defensive one. The old hairpin then. Charles Clark with another good run now in the slipstream, heading up the hill, looking to try and have a go maybe at McLean's. Does he commit to the inside? No, doesn't quite. I love that camera angle as they go into McLean's. You can really see the drivers trying to whip it up the inside into McLean's. It is a good place to pass, but you've got to be really committed, and you sort of rely on the car ahead seeing you coming. If they don't and they turn in, then you are absolutely on a collision course. And at least one of you, if not both of you, are going to end up in the gravel trap. Got a flash of the lights there from Charles Clark, maybe just getting a bit impatient, being stuck behind Bartholomew because he can see, oh, big wiggle over the curbs there, that slows him down actually coming out of the chicane, but he can see Harry Foster closing in behind. The team probably need to get on the radio to tell him that Harry has this time penalty, although it's not going to stop Harry from attacking, of course. He'll be thinking that if he clears these two, he could maybe escape up the road and undo even more of that 5-second penalty. So Foster, that third car in line, is most definitely going to have a go at making away past Charles Clark ahead of him. So across the line again, into Redgate corner. We have completed 6 laps of this final race of the season for the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. And 4.75 seconds now is the advantage for James Dorlin at the head of the field. There goes Rob Boston, number 69. Rob Boston, who runs cars in seemingly every single championship in the UK. He runs Mazdas, he's run Ginettas as well, in things like the GT4 Super Cup. Very busy man is Rob, but easy to forget sometimes, I think, that he is a very handy racing driver himself, and he likes to get out there on track whenever he can. And good to see them venturing into the world of Porsche Cayman Sprint Challenge. had a slow start in race 1, so we never really got to see exactly what he was capable of. He's sort of matching the lap times of this group ahead, actually. If you could just find another second and a half and catch up to them, I think he would actually be capable of racing with them. So with the arrival now of Harry Foster on his tail, Charles Clark seemingly less interested in attacking Matthew Armstrong than he is hanging on to this P2. So as they head down into that Melbourne loop again, you can see the gap between second and third and fourth, excuse me, is that little bit bigger than the gap between the fourth and fifth place cars. 5-second penalty there being confirmed for Charles Clark now. So Charles Clark and Harry Foster have both got a 5-second penalty. Again, it doesn't tell us why. That could be track limits, although again we've had no warnings about track limits so far that I've seen. But Charles has been using a lot of the curb through that chicane, hasn't he, at the Fogarty S's. So I wonder if he's done that once too often and been given a 5-second penalty as a result. That would be the standard first penalty for track limits offences, and we're hearing it is because of that the chicane. Do we know if that's what Harry Foster's penalty is for as well? I wouldn't know. That came through an awful lot earlier, and I suspected it was too early for it to be track limits, but we'll try and get confirmation of that if we can. So Clark then, that fight he's having with Foster is now a genuine one then, because they've both got the same penalty. So they'll both drop behind Rob Boston at this rate. And I'm hearing it was the same penalty for the same problem. So here they come then. Let's see if they've learnt their lesson. Yeah, ish. That was a little bit less aggressive than we've seen from them both in the past. But yeah, there we go. That's what it was then. Penalty for exceeding track limits through the chicane. And you can see why, because you gain quite a good chunk of time from cutting across. It's the right-hand element of the Fogarty S's that drivers are doing it at. You can't really cut the left-hand because they put a tyre stack in the way. And people do like to complain about those tyre stacks being on the apexes of corners, but they do their job because no one is cutting the left-hander and everyone's cutting the right-hander. So, you know, putting a physical object in the way, it does deter drivers from breaking the rules and cutting the corner. Of course, it also means that you do a lot more damage if you get it wrong or you get forced over the curb by somebody. And that is an ongoing argument, really, in UK motorsport. Now, you're not going to believe this. Charles Clark and Harry Foster have a 5-second penalty for track limits, which dropped them behind Rob Boston, who has also now been given a 5-second penalty for track limits. So all three of those cars now all have the same penalty. I'm going to take a wild stab in the dark and say that it's for track limits at turn 10. And I did spot Rob doing that, actually, in the background when I was focusing on Clark and Foster through there that time. I noticed that Rob Boston was a bit wayward, so now he won't benefit from them getting the penalties, and he'll have to try and overtake them on the track himself. That might happen, though, because he just put in a personal best lap, because he cut the corner, but anyway, he put in a personal best lap, and he's now only 0.8 of a second behind them, so he might be able to become a part of that fight on merit, but he's going to have to work for it a bit harder now. There is Carl Cavers heading up through Coppice Corner. Carl Cavers in the number 22 car, claimed one podium within the AM class last year. I didn't know this about Carl, actually, but I was reading up some information about him ahead of the event. He works in the video game industry, and if you are a motorsports fan and a motorsports video game fan, which I'm sure many of you are, then you've got Carl to thank for some real classics, actually. He's credited as having worked on the likes of Forza Motorsport 7, Dirt 2 and the Toka Race Driver 2 game back in 2005, which I spent way too many hours playing when I was a kid. So Carl Cavers, that's his day job, and then comes and races Porsches for fun at the weekend. He's running at the moment in 4th place, but that is under threat, isn't it? Because Matt Carl-Henny is right there on his tail now. Matt, quick in this car, but perhaps struggling with overtaking. He had a really good start in this morning's first race and then just sort of had to hold position and had good pace in the wet, but not always the most aggressive driver is Matt Carl-Henny. Tends to get to the end of most races in one piece, which is really important, and will certainly make him popular with the team. But right now needs to try and find a little bit more confidence on the brakes somewhere, maybe, to try and get past Carl Cavers, who's a bit wider than him through the middle part of the Craner curves. Further up the road, the penalty crew 4th, 5th and 6th places, Clark, Foster and Boston, getting themselves closer and closer together because, again on that lap, Boston was quicker than the two ahead of him. He did a 35.5, it was a 35.8 for Foster and a 36.0 for Clark, so the 4th place car is slower than the 5th place car, which is slower than the 6th place car. They've all got 5-second penalties. Oh, and they're not alone now because Carl Cavers has got one as well. So Carl Cavers, who I was just talking about, also now being given a 5-second penalty. So Matt Carl-Heddy will inherit that 10th place and 4th in class, unless, of course, he goes and gets a track limits penalty. And quite frankly, I wouldn't bet against that with 9 minutes still to go. So of the 13 cars running, 4 of them have picked up 5-second track limits penalties. And as far as I'm aware, they're all for the same bit of track that they're cutting as well. So you'd think they'd cotton on and get the message here. Through Redgate corner go these three. You can see how the white and orange car of Boston has really closed in now. So Rob Boston, having caught these two, is he going to be able to find a way past them? We do see this quite often in this championship. I made the point in race 1 that a 25-minute race doesn't sound that long, but you get a good amount of laps in 25 minutes, and that puts quite a lot of wear on the tyres. So it is important to manage those tyres, manage the rubber throughout the course of the race. They run on Michelin control slick and wet tyres, depending on the conditions. They'll all be out there on slicks, I'm sure, in this race. And so those slick tyres, they will lose performance over the race. And those that look after the tyres in the first half of the race will find that the tyres look after them as we get into the final part of the race. Right then, it's been at least half a lap since I mentioned track limits penalties. Car number 77 has now got a 10-second penalty, so Charles Clark is now once again in a position where he's losing places to the 2 cars behind him. So all that Harry Foster and Rob Boston need to do is not exceed track limits again, and they're going to be handed 4th and 5th places respectively. The trouble is, of course, they're also battling each other, and they won't necessarily know about this penalty for Clark, so they're in a way quite likely to keep on exceeding those track limits. Charles Clark then, a 10-second penalty, will still only drop him those 2 places though. Alexei Maliakin in 7th position is some 12 or 13 seconds behind him, so he'll lose positions to Harry Foster and Rob Boston, but should still come home 6th place, unless of course that penalty gets increased. The next step would be 15 seconds, and then once it gets beyond that, they start looking at stop and go or drive-through penalties. Hopefully it won't come to that though. Down through the old hairpin. All being quite neat and tidy there, coming out of the quick right-hander up the hill towards McLean's. Now, Boston might just be close enough here to have a go at Harry Foster. Harry certainly thinks so because he defends the inside line, and that means Boston is quicker out of the corner. Look at that, inches between the front of Boston's car and the rear of Foster's. And again, a wide line in there for Boston. He cuts across the curb on the inside, and he might just be level now with the youngster as they come out of Coppice corner. Foster almost off the road altogether. Wheel to wheel then for 5th position. Down the exhibition straight into the chicane. The outside line is held by Boston. That's not really where you want to be. And Foster will get into the corner ahead. Now, if that wasn't exceeding track limits for Rob Boston, I don't know what was. We'll keep an eye to the timing screen, see if he gets in trouble for that. But for the time being, he's back on the attack again, goes to the outside into the Melbourne hairpin, and then cuts back again on the inside, gets that late apex, draws back alongside, but now the track goes left again at Goddard's, and so he once more finds himself on the wrong side of the road. This is music to the ears of Charles Clark, who's already started to pull away from them. Needs to pull a 5-second gap, though, if he is to hold on to this position. Because he's got a 10-second penalty, but that's only 5 seconds more than these two have got. Again, defensive driving here from Clark. I'll tell you what, from Foster, excuse me. I'll tell you what, though, Clark is 2 seconds up the road. He could get a 5-second gap if they keep on like this. Still 5.5 minutes to go. And as long as Foster is defending from Boston, they're holding each other up enough that Clark is disappearing up the road. Well, Boston can't quite find a way through here, can he then? Looks to the outside into the old hairpin, gets a bit of a wiggle on. They're both a bit wide, though. Right up the curb goes Harry Foster. And now we're back exactly where we started. This is where the first attack came from Boston a lap ago. And he's about the same distance behind as they turn into the right-hander this time. Through McLean's, doesn't get quite as close to the back of the 24 car this time around. Makes his way now up into Coppice corner, so Harry Foster weathered that storm pretty well. But he's going to have a little bit more defending to do, I think, because Boston ain't going to drop away, and his car clearly has come on strong in the second half of the race, so he's arguably getting quicker. And perhaps Harry Foster going the other way. He's a bit slow off the chicane, so again goes to the inside to cover. To the outside goes Boston. Been here before, though, haven't we? Now, what did I tell you? 10-second penalty for Rob Boston for track limits, so he did cut the track last time around through the chicane. So this is now not really a legitimate battle, because Harry Foster's going to get back ahead of him anyway. Again, pending further penalties, etc., etc. But he'd like to keep hold of the position anyway, if he can, into the final 4 minutes of the race now. Boston right in behind him as they come across the start-finish line and head towards Redgate Corner. Again, the defensive inside line is taken by Foster. To the outside goes Boston. Looking to tee up that switchback manoeuvre. He really wants to just wriggle up the inside going through Hollywood, but can't get there. Car's very evenly matched as they come out of the turn. Mid-engined car, of course, the Porsche Cayman, so it's got quite good balance. It still has that good Porsche traction off the corners, but not quite as much maybe as the more traditional rear-engined cars. Rob Boston weaving around everywhere again. He's almost pushing Harry Foster up the hill there towards McLean's. Takes all of the curve on the inside. Boston using all of his years of racing experience here to try and outfox the youngster here. Up into Coppice Corner. Looks for the good exit, gets the good exit, and he draws level-ish once again. But this, as we saw a couple of laps ago, puts him on the wrong side of the road, really, for the chicane. Rob doesn't want to be there. Instead, he dives for the inside. He's on the wet part of the track. Oh, a huge moment from Rob Boston. How on earth did he save that? Well, that was some A-star car control, that from Rob. He dived to the inside, which was an aggressive move anyway, and I don't think he realised how damp it was over there. The rear broke loose on him. And if he hadn't have caught that, he would have gone careering into the back of Foster's car. Look, he jinks to the inside, gets on the wet stuff, and so nearly loses it. How he didn't lose it, I don't know, but how he actually managed to slow the car down is beyond me, because you'd have thought he'd have had to have got off the brakes to settle the car, but still almost made the corner, really. Didn't run fully off the road. So that now means Harry Foster is 2.2 seconds ahead of him, which is about the biggest gap he's had over Boston all race. And with 2.25 minutes to go, so 2 laps left in the race, I'm not convinced that Rob is going to have the time to get there now. Might have to settle for 6th place, but he's kept us very, very well entertained for the last 15 minutes or so, chasing down and trying to get past Harry Foster. James Dorlin, though, he's not had anyone to overtake all weekend. He's led every single racing lap here at Donington, and he only has another lap and a half to lead now to come home and get another race victory. He won an awful lot of races last year, of course, on his way to the title. This one, in a way, a bit more special, because when you step away from a championship for any period of time, it's always nice to come back and go up against perhaps a slightly different crop of drivers and show that, yeah, you're still just as quick as you were and you're still quick enough to beat them. James, of course, prior to racing in this championship, had some success in British GT and with Tolman Motorsport. Also former runner-up in the Renault UK Clio Cup. Last year, he won 7 of the races, had 11 podiums from 12 races. It really was a dominant performance from him. Got his teammate here, Alexei Maliakin, who has never raced before, only track days. And Maliakin really showing how strong he is here. He's dominated, really, in the AM category. He's got the lead in this one by nearly 4 seconds over Kurt Leimer, who's now 6.3 ahead of Nigel Rice. Remember how much pressure Nigel was putting him under in the early stages, but Kurt's managed to find some good speed. And they are the only 2 AM drivers in the 1 minute 37s at the moment. Also in the 37s, actually, last time through was Harry Foster. Had a slow lap for some reason, so he's now only 1.4 seconds ahead of Rob Boston, but they're on the final lap of the race now. Race leader, in fact, is already heading up towards Coppice for the final time. There he is, right on cue. And James Dorlin, Maliakin's teammate, on his way to a double race victory here at Donington Park. Heads down the exhibition straight then towards the Fogarty S's. Brilliant sound these things make. They really do look well balanced as well, don't they? Yeah, 3.8 litre 6-cylinder boxer engine, producing about 425 brake horsepower in these cars. 6-speed PDK gearbox, Rear-wheel drive, of course. Mid-engine, though, as I said, that big change for Porsche, but it's worked well in the Cayman. Bit of showboating now from James Dorlin as he brings the car towards the checkered flag. One more corner to negotiate, and then he will be the race winner. For the second time here at Donington Park in the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain, it is the Donington double for Dorlin. He comes across the line, takes the checkered flag, flashes the lights, calm as you like, and what a calm and calculated victory that was. The gap back to Bartholomew, I mean, we're still waiting. There he is. Chad Bartholomew now appears around the corner. Good effort that, though, from 5th on the grid after his issues in the earlier race. 3rd place goes to Armstrong, and then those on the naughty step. Harry Foster will get a time penalty, so will Charles Clark, so will Rob Boston, and the positions will end with Foster 4th, Boston 5th, and Charles Clark losing both of those positions as a result of his 10-second penalty. Alexei Maliakin comes out of the last corner then. He is the race winner in the AM class. A double race victory for him as well. So a really, really good day for Redline Racing, who get double race victories in both classes. Strong effort that from Kurt Lima as well. Did most of the work on the opening lap, gaining 3 places to take 2nd place in the AM class, with Nigel Rice about to come home in 3rd. Dorlin then, the race winner, comfortably so as well. That was an 11.8 second margin, bigger than his 9.1 second winning margin in the opening race of the day. And James Dorlin, looking forward to seeing what he gets up to next, actually. A slightly quieter year in 2021. Fingers crossed he'll be able to get a sponsorship deal together in the near future to go on and continue his progress up the motorsport ladder. Team Parker Racing pretty happy as well, because they had a car finish on the podium there in the shape of Matthew Armstrong. Double podium finish for them this weekend. Debriefing already about that one. They had the wet tyres there ready and waiting, because it is still dark and gloomy here at Donington. It's not been particularly bright at any point today. I'm really not convinced it's shorts weather. I know they're busy working up a sweat, maybe fixing the cars in between races, but yes, it's certainly not been very warm at any point this weekend here at Donington Park, certainly over the course of today. James Dorlin then victorious in the 2nd race of the weekend for the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. He takes the victory by 11.8 seconds over Jack Bartholomew in 2nd, Matthew Armstrong 3rd, Charles Clark 4th, and Alexei Maliakin gets the 5th place. Now, I had, yes, Maliakin in 5th because Foster, I think Harry Foster's been given maybe a 15-second penalty or something. Because actually both he and Boston dropped behind Maliakin. Anyway, Maliakin 5th place overall is the winner in the AM category, ahead of Foster and Boston. Kurt Lima 2nd in the AM class. Nigel Rice was 3rd, ahead of Matt Carl-Henny and Carl Cavers, with Pete Chambers. And at the very back of the grid, John White rounding out the 13 runners. So that is it for the day then for the Porsches. It for the season, actually, as well. This was their final round of the 2021 Championship. James Dorlin makes his way through the scrutineering bay into Parc Ferme and pulls up to be congratulated by his team. And yeah, James Dorlin just reminding us all that he is genuinely a class act, and still just as quick in these Porsche Caymans as he ever was. Gets out of the car. Do we get a reaction from him? Yeah, a bit of a fist bump there. Pats the side of the car. Sometimes easy to forget, actually, that what looks like sometimes a fairly uneventful race from the outside, it's still a real adrenaline rush to be out there on track. I'm sure he will have enjoyed driving the car. Some drivers do just enjoy being out there on their own, don't they? And you know, setting lap times to try and chase and working on car setup. But James Dorlin very happy with the race victory, and it is his 2nd one of the weekend. Highlights then of the 2nd race for the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. James Dorlin made a good start from pole position. It wasn't a brilliant start, though, from 2nd on the grid for Matthew Armstrong. He held on to 2nd place going into the 1st corner, but Harry Foster was up the inside. To the outside, though, went Jack Bartholomew. He got squeezed a little bit wide, but he broke through into 3rd and then claimed 2nd with a really good dive on the brakes into the Melbourne hairpin and moved ahead of Armstrong. He wasn't, though, able to chase after the race leader, James Dorlin. Dorlin was already pulling clear by about 2 or 3 seconds in just the opening couple of laps, and James Dorlin never looked back, eventually winning the race by nearly 12 seconds. The big battle was between Rob Boston and Harry Foster. They both kept picking up track limits penalties, but it didn't really seem to matter. The battle was hugely entertaining. Boston, try as he might though, couldn't ever find a way through. James Dorling came through to take the race victory overall though, gets the double victory here at Donington Park, winning, as I said, by nearly 12 seconds. It was a very comfortable race victory for Dorling, with Jack Bartholomew second and Matthew Armstrong third, whilst Dorling's teammate won in the AM class as well. A big moment though for Rob Boston as he tried to get past Harry Foster. A very good save from Rob.